Welcome to I Am Well podcast. I am your host, Gemma, a nutritionist and mindset coach passionate about all things health and wellness. I'm going to take you on a journey to discovering what health means for you and how to create a life you love living. I'm on a mission to uplift those who feel overwhelmed with what it means to be healthy, reminding you, my listeners, that nutrition is only one aspect of health, and empower you to live your best life on your terms. Let's get to it. Hi, and welcome back to I Am Well podcast. Today, I have on the amazing Shannon from Somatic Body. Shannon has come onto the podcast before, so this is our second conversation, and I'm really excited because we're really leaning into topics more on feminine and masculine energy. Maybe this is new to you, maybe you've heard this before, but it's really going to help so many women out there, especially if you're running your own business, you're running your own race, or even just the typical mum or typical woman out there, because we all go into that, what they call the rushing women syndrome. And we do experience burnout from time to time. So I have Shannon joining me. Shannon is actually overseas at the moment. So Shannon, tell us where you are at the moment, because I actually don't know where you are. Because I know you're overseas
Hello.
somewhere.
Yes. Yes, I'm in the States at the moment. So I'm in Miami, Florida, or just north of Miami at this beautiful coastal town called Lauderdale by the Sea. And it is just a dream here. Yeah.
Yeah, because where were you before? Was it last
We
week?
were in Europe.
Yeah,
10 days ago, we flew out of Europe because we have a visa that we've submitted and we're waiting for that visa to be approved.
yeah.
So we're in like the US and wherever else the journey takes us until our visa's approved. And then once we finally get the visa, we can go back to Spain and settle down some roots there for at least a year. Yeah.
One of my daughter's teacher, she is from Spain and she actually goes back there today, I think. But she was saying she's been here for 2 years and I had no idea. And I was like, wow. And me with geography, I was literally like ashamed to admit, but I was like, okay, where is Spain? Because I've never even been to Europe. So I was
Yeah.
like, this is, me with geography is not good. But how exciting. Like, what a exciting journey for you and your partner. Like, and have you been to the US before?
No, this was, well, apart from Hawaii, but I don't really class that as the classic experience of the US. And I'd never really had a desire to go to the US. So this is like my first time where the opportunity presented itself, and it took the opportunity presenting itself for me to actually want to go. Like I became excited at the prospect once I realized where we were going.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. And are you liking that there at the moment, or do you want to go back to Europe like ASAP?
There's definitely some aspects of both that I love. Like, I do love Europe for its quality of food that it offers, the standards. We could go into that. Obviously, you're a nutritionist, so we could go
Yeah.
into that. And also just low cost of living. So, like, the
Mm.
ridiculously cheap way of living there and how simple and they also have a culture of just slowing down, and they actually have that perfect balance of the feminine and masculine in Europe. Whereas here in America, it's beautiful where we are. It's sunny. It's like a dream in terms of the environment and the weather. But I would have to say it's probably very close to how we live as Australians, just everything's bigger and more dramatic. No
Yeah.
offense if anyone's listening and they're American. There's nothing wrong with being more dramatic. It actually keeps things exciting. And I really love everyone I've interacted with here. They're so friendly and interesting. They always have a story to share. So, there's good in both in like Europe and America. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, is it kind of like in Australia, like the hustle and bustle, the grind, a bit
Yes.
energy? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. But then you also have quieter places. So we did a bit of research before we moved over here from Europe. There's small places that are quieter, and we purposely picked an hour north of Miami because we knew it would be quieter than Miami.
Nice.
Miami's like coastal, but it's kind of more like a city version of the Gold Coast. So it is very hustle and bustle still. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Very
Yeah.
nice. Well, I'm extremely
Mm.
jealous. I definitely want to go overseas and I definitely want to experience Europe. But that really leads us into today's topic, I guess, talking
Yeah.
about that burnout. And I was literally just explaining to you, this is something that I'm experiencing with my clients at the moment. I think because we're coming towards the end of the year, and I do have clients that work and then have their businesses on the side. And it's women clients as well. And I do feel like, and they're mums too. So I do feel like it's hard to find that balance. And we were kind of, I know I've been brought up, like my history as a child, getting brought up with this, seeing my parents work really hard. And I was always kind of like, okay, the harder you work, the more successful you are. So I've really had to teach myself to slow down, and it's been the hardest thing to teach, and I'm still working on it today because I still have that voice in the back of my head that's like, you need to keep going, you need to work hard because if you don't, things won't move. And that's that fear in me. So I guess let's just start off with like explaining this, the energy behind that and the somatics behind it, like what your knowledge is around feminine and masculine energy. Let's just explain what that is first to start off with.
Yes, because when we hear, that's a perfect question, because when we hear feminine, masculine, and it is quite a hype at the moment, like I truly believe that things circulate in, I guess, fads and become popular. But I also believe that the reason that is because collectively we're all in alignment at one point or another. So right now we are all kind of like you said, coming to the end of the year. We're all seeking, to find ways to rest when we're burning out at the end of the year as we get tired. And so the only way to really explain what masculine and feminine energy is, because we hear it around social media so much, is by actually covering archetypes and what they are. Because really, the masculine and feminine within is an archetype. So I'm going to keep it really basic.
Yeah, I like
When
that.
I first started, yeah, it's just so we can conceptualize because our mind likes to conceptualize before we run in with the energetics and the philosophy and the feel of it all. We want to know before we feel, right? Like before we
Mhm.
start feeling into it. So when I started my somatic embodiment coaching course, which was in 2021, I think, um, we covered Carl Jung's work, who's a doctor in psychology. And he's very well renowned, and he can, some of his beliefs can be a little bit controversial, some of his theories can be, but one of his like strong standing theories is the archetypes, and he has quite a few books on them too. So I don't know them off by heart, but I can drop them over to you for the reference list for when you
Yeah,
submit
I'll
this
put them in the
podcast.
show
But
notes. Yeah.
he does go into like the archetypes and what they are. I should get around to what they are. They Carl Jung explains them basically as philosophical symbols, themes, or characters that are used to express the concepts of mental frameworks in human beings. So, like in essence, the archetypes are defined by like behaviors and characteristics of where we are at one point or another in our life, in our day to day. And it's essentially an essence that we carry with us.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but archetypes, like the best way to explain it would be to give you an example, right? Like we
Mhm.
have, so for example, there's female and male archetypes as well, and they will represent different developmental periods as we move along and develop as people in this lifetime. So an example is like I think I talked about it a little bit in the previous podcast. We have like the maiden, and that's when we go into from child to having our first bleed and becoming a woman, not expecting, but a woman in waiting, I guess.
Yeah.
And then from there, we then go into like our mother phase, which is an archetype, and then our Marga phase, which is where we discover a truer essence of who we are and come into our power. And then we have our crone phase, which is like, as you know, a lot of people describe the crone as the old wise woman. And
Yeah.
then you've also got like people like the protector. In the masculine, you have like the lover and the gardener, and then you have the protector or the king and the warrior, and then you've also got like the trickster. And these sound like tarot cards as well, because a lot of them are actually depicted in the traditional Rider-Waite tarot cards as well. So they're all essentially used to describe a certain essence that we all embody within us. That's what archetypes are. So when we come back and circle back around to masculine and feminine, we're really talking about an essence that exists universally, but also exists within us. And we don't just have one or the other, we have all aspects. So as a woman, we have the maiden and the mother and the marga and the crone existing within us all at the same time. It's just which one we're embodying and tapping into at one point or another. And so this is where we can even circle back around to burnout. Like a lot of us are at the end of the year, like you said, we're more in our masculine right now if we're feeling burnt out and we've been go, go, go. We're more embodying that masculine essence right now. It doesn't mean we don't have a feminine within us that we can tap into.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably how I would summarize what masculine and feminine is when we talk about, you know, how it exists and what it even means on a conceptual level. Um, from there, we could actually go into like what they look like. So I just briefly talked about how being in our go, go, go and being burnt out is a masculine essence, but we actually have really positive ways of embodying the masculine. And then we also have really negative ways of embodying the masculine. So we could take stress, for example. Stress can be really good if you utilize it the right way. But if you utilize it the wrong way, it can burn you out. And so it's actually like, how are you using your masculine essence? Are you using it to the point where your cup is empty and you're taking care of others so much that you're running on empty?
Mm.
Because that's not the correct way to embody the masculine. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's where the balance of bringing in the feminine comes in. So we can learn to soften and take care of ourselves more, and create the time and space that we need, and actually the permission that we need to give ourselves to slow down and have rest. It's kind of like you think of like work and play, right? Like you've got work being the masculine and play being the feminine. Neither of them are bad or good, but you can utilize them in really positive ways or you can utilize them in negative ways and they can impact you negatively. So, an example of embodying the feminine in a negative way, like we've all heard of toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. Um, Without being too controversial, but I think a example that everyone will resonate with is like feminism, even just saying that word, right?
Mm.
It's actually the sad thing is what it is to be a feminist never used to be a bad thing. I think they've just shone a bad light on what it is now to be a feminist because it's almost like it started off with pure and loving intentions to have equal rights.
Mm.
But now it's like they've gone too far the other way and they're like, okay, well, actually, I need to take a template of what the masculine is being in power and being go, go, go and feeling like I need to do it all on my own because that's what the men do. Now
Mm.
I need to take that and embody that. So it's almost like they're taking their feminine essence and using a template of what I believe to be a negative form of the masculine energy and embodying that by mistake, not realizing it. So that's kind of what femininity has developed into over the last couple of years. And that's why it's developed such a, not femininity, sorry, but being a feminist, I should say. And that's why it's developed into such a like negative viewpoint now. Like people have cast a real shadow on that. And same with like using the word toxic masculinity. There's such a shadow cast on that now because what is that? It's essentially the masculine essence being utilized in the wrong way. It's
Mm.
not that being masculine is wrong. It's
Yeah.
not that going to work and doing the work is wrong. It's just how are you doing that? For
Mm.
example, how is your stress resilience? Are you developing the right protocols to use stress in the right way, to use it in your favor versus using it as a form of overwhelm and because it's socially expected to be go, go, go and to be just like the men have been for many years? Because it's not just the women who've been suffering from, say, for example, unequal rights. And now suddenly we have more and more equal rights over time. But also, what has that done to the masculine in saying, oh, well, we don't need men? How does that feel on the man's side to be
Mm.
felt that way? You know? Um,
You're bringing out like
So
all the complexities around it, and I'm like, yeah, it's so
so much, but I don't know where to stop
true.
and where to slow down. So you just leave me with what you
No,
want to
no,
know
it's
from all
it's
that.
so true. I was just like thinking, I'm like, it's so, yeah, it's complex because that's just that point then, what you said with sometimes like when you're talking about toxic masculinity and saying and the feminist and being like, yeah, we don't need the men, it can put that down. I've experienced it with my husband, even just an example here, where, sometimes we're going on and on about how bad the men have been treating us, how bad men are out there. And he takes that, like he's sometimes a bit of an empath and he really takes that like heavy and thinks I'm literally talking about him, or other people who are talking about it are talking about him, when like, women around him have experienced bad experiences with men and they're just saying men are bad, like men are just awful in general. And then that really affects him because he thinks it's like you're literally talking about him. And he's like, I'm not like that. So I just really resonated with that last line you said. But like, let me see if I've got my head around this though, because this is me like hearing the archetypes for the first time. Because you're right, I've heard feminine and masculine energy before. I hear it thrown around a lot and I hear it talked about a lot, but I don't know the ins and outs of it. So you're saying there's feminine and then there's masculine energy, but there's different archetypes for each. Is that what you were saying? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like the archetypes, like there is a masculine and feminine essence within us, which is an archetype of its own right, each of them.
Okay.
And then within that, we have almost like what you could call, say sub archetypes, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like there are many archetypes, and you could organize it very much cohesively in your brain to make more sense of it. But at the end of the day, there are different, I guess you could say, essences. So, like, you have the feminine archetype, the feminine essence in your body. And within that, you also have the sub archetypes of the phases of being a woman. So that's where, like, the maiden, the mother, the marga, and the crone come in. It
Are
doesn't
some of
mean that it's
those
like,
worse than others, or are they all like they've got their goods and bads for each of them?
I think with all archetypes, you can have good and bad, and it's how you embody it, it's how you utilize it. And you could take any archetype, so like you could even take the trickster, right? A lot of people think the trickster or the joker in the tarot card reading is a really bad reading,
Mm.
but even say if you've done tarot reading, I don't know if you know this, but there's like the upside down reading and then there's the card upright reading. And they say that the card upright is the positive meaning of that symbol. So, say the trickster. And
Yeah.
then the upside down reading of that trickster is a negative reading. But using looking at it from a different perspective. So let's shift that perception. If the card's upright, I'm utilizing that archetype in the right way. If the
Mm.
card's downright, what does it have to teach me and what can I change? Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, like every archetype, whether it's masculine, feminine, whether it's the trickster, whether it's the king or the protector or the maiden or the mother, it can have a good and a bad use. And I think the easiest way to just get to the point there is it's either coming from how we're embodying it, is either coming from a good use, which is coming from love vibration,
Yeah.
or it's coming from a negative use, which is coming from fear.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Yeah.
to
So,
put it really simply, if anyone's listening, like, what are the signs that someone might be using it in the wrong way? You know what I mean?
well, depleted comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we're in love energy, we are connected to the collective, to the divine, whatever your higher source is, whether it be God or whatever. We are plugged into that source. We're not just existing within our own energy. We are, but we're also plugged into a source. And that source is very much, well, because it's the collective, it has all this energy to exchange.
Mm.
From within me, I can release out, and from without me, I can bring in loving energy. If I'm then putting that to the side, if I'm then instead living in like a fear energy, then I'm actually just going inward and shutting off and dissociating. and living instead of externally with the collective and sharing that energy. I'm shutting off from that energy and I'm doing it all on my own, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being closed off because I don't trust.
Mm.
I'm being closed off because of my ancestral trauma that I'm not even consciously aware of, but it's like an instinct in me that feels fear when something happens.
Yeah.
So that's the most simple way to know if we're embodying a masculine or feminine essence within us in a negative or a positive way. And you can see how feeling fearful or feeling shut off and disconnected can be depleting. Like even if you take anxiety and depression,
Mm.
what do we do when we feel anxious and depression? Like with anxiety, we generally dissociate. That's a way of shutting off
Mm.
until we potentially go to the point of having a panic attack.
Yeah.
You know, we become numb and dissociated and then we don't know what's going on and then our body starts to have all these symptoms. That's anxiety, that's shutting off, that's a form. Then there's depression. What do we do when we have depression? Or even if we're just having a bad day and we feel the essence of depression settling in for the day, we don't go out and socialize and feel a sense of community and connect to the collective. We shut down.
Mm.
So I guess when you to come back to your question, when you're asking how do we know the signs, it's that exactly right there. When we feel a disconnect in any way, we need to look into that and see what it is there that's depleting us and making us feel disconnected.
Mm.
And then what is it within either our masculine or feminine that we're not harnessing? How do we know if
Yeah.
it's good or bad or if we need to make changes? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just where is that coming from? Am I disconnected? Am I feeling dissociated? Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
answer.
So, like with my clients at the moment, one of the questions was like they have like a huge to-do list and they feel like they have to get it done.
Mhm.
Um, and they they're a mum, they've got their business on the side, and they've got these kids that like they and then they've got their actual work and this huge, as I said, this huge to-do list. Well, they're saying it's huge, you know what I mean? It always feels bigger than what it is. What would your advice to kind of like help cope with that from an energy point of view? Like how do you cope with looking at a massive to-do list but knowing that, and they know how to regulate their system, they know how to regulate and make it calm down, but they're feeling like they can't get there? It's like what you said, they've disassociated, you know what I mean? They've got to try and just get the work done. They've just got to get this to-do list done. What would your advice be around that?
What would I do? So your question, sorry, just to reiterate, your question is what would my advice be to women who feel burnt out and go, go, go?
And they feel
What
like they've
would
got
they
this.
do to sh
Yeah, they feel like they've got this massive to-do list and they're like, well, I have to get it done. So
Mhm.
they turn into that masculine energy, even though their body is crying out, like their health is crying out, and they're saying, no, you need to slow down. But they're like, but
Mhm.
I have to get it done. How do you kind of balance that out when you feel like you have to do something?
Well, the simple answer is it won't balance out until you have enough of a why
Hmm.
to do it yourself.
Yeah, right.
So there has to be a really strong need and desire and want to want to make change. Because, like you said, you can have a massive to do list, but it can actually feel more massive than what it actually is when you
Mm,
break it down. You know, we have it all comes down to perception. We have a perception that we're always busy. And if we're used to running in that masculine go, 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 then we actually dissociate from the feminine and forget what it feels like to grace ourselves with rest.
hmm
And so when we're dissociated and shut off from that, we don't actually know we are because we've suddenly formed into this over dominance of masculine energy. And we're no longer even remembering what it feels like to be truly at rest in the feminine,
mm,
truly surrendered, and truly trusting in things taking care of themselves. We're more in the form of control. How do I control this? Right.
yeah.
So, to the women out there who don't know what to do when they're feeling overwhelmed and burnt out and don't know the first step to take in terms of reducing their to-do list, for example, or their workload. It has to come from a place. My advice would be tune into your why. Why is it that you're desiring that? Because it
Mm,
has to come from a place of good intent and love. And it's really hard to do that when you're burnt out. It
yeah.
is. But this is where the feather, the brick, and the truck comes in. So, have you heard of that term before?
No, please explain.
Okay. I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't know where this saying comes from, but I
Yeah.
love using this analogy, the
Mm,
feather, the brick, and the truck. When our body is depleted and burnt out,
mm,
first, it'll start with a little tickle, a little nudge, maybe a sore back or a bulging disc for a week, and then it settles down, right?
mhm,
Then there's the truck. Okay, now my bulging disc is herniated and I have to rehab it and go to the physio for a couple months. Then, sorry, that was the brick, the feather, the brick. And then there's the truck.
mm,
That's when we get the big old whammy. And oh my God, now I'm in chronic pain and it's been a year. That's an
yeah.
example of the feather, the brick, and the truck. Sorry, the feather, the brick, and the truck. Um, what I'm getting to with that analogy is at what point, and we're all different beings, so it's going to be different for everyone, but at what point does our body scream at us enough for us to want to really make change?
Yeah.
And so the women who are coming to you, it sounds like they're coming to you because they want to make the change.
Yeah.
All they need is your guidance and the resources to do it and a strong enough why and to keep coming back to that why.
Mm,
So
yeah.
keep bringing them, that would be my suggestion. Keep bringing them back to why is it that you want this? Is that why coming from a really true, divine, loving essence? And if they're not sure, it's most likely because they're not tapped into their feminine essence because they're dissociated from it. So it's going to take time to develop that why. So
Mm,
just let them know, hey, it's okay. If it doesn't feel truly aligned and your why's not sticking, that's fine. Just keep coming back to it. And
mhm,
that's why they're there with you. They're with you to create that sense of community, that sense of support. And in fact, in seeking that sense of support is actually a part of their feminine screaming out because
mm,
support is the feminine. There's
mm,
all these beautiful like aspects of the archetypes I could go through. So like for example, the feminine aspect of communicating is listening.
mm,
And then the masculine aspect of communicating is leading and talking. And then it's the same with like community. So, like, you can be a leader in your community or you can be a nurturer in your community. And if they're seeking out ways to nurture through you, then they're seeking out an essence of the feminine because they know they need it. They just don't know on a conscious level yet.
mhm.
Does that make sense? So
No,
just getting them to keep coming back to the feminine, the why.
and yeah, like that's pretty much what I was saying too at a point. Like, when do you start to realize how much it's affecting your health and start to putting things into perspective? Because I was even saying for myself, like, I would always have that fear, like I have to put in so many hours for my business, because that's kind of what society kind of tells you. It's like you have to work super hard if you're wanting to start up a business. That's the only way, when it's actually not. But
Mm-hmm.
work yourself to the bone, to the point where your body's crying out. But then that's where I was saying, when's it too much? Like, as you said, when's it get to the point where you hit the brick or the truck? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's what was happening to me. My body was crying out like 2 years ago, and I wasn't listening because I was like, no, I have to keep pushing. I have to keep going. I think it's like also the dancer in me. Like, it didn't matter if I was sick, if I was injured, you had to keep going back to dancing. You had to keep practicing. Like, so it was that energy that I was always brought up with. Um, but yeah, when's it get to that point where it's like your health is actually so much more important? And then you look at the big picture and you're like, I can't believe I am freaking out, busting my ass for this to-do list when I'm putting my own health at risk. Like, yeah, maybe it's only at the feather point right now. Maybe it's only at the brick point right now. But what it can get to that truck, like as you said, that huge slam, And that's where I think it's like most important. And that's why I think like preventative health is more important than trying to then get to the point of them finding a cure. Um, so I completely resonate with everything that you said. And I love that analogy that you were talking about. I think that's a really good analogy. So yeah, I really love that.
I
When,
think it's acceptance too, like coming from a coaching perspective, and I know you'll resonate with this as well. It is really hard to, and this is another analogy, I love them, to lead a horse to water knowing that you can't control whether they're going to drink or not.
mm,
Like you can only lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink.
hmm
They're in their own uh, experience.
mm,
Their version of what their feather is different to yours. Their version of what their brick feels like is different to yours.
hmm
It's like you could talk about it like pain tolerance, right? Like you might get a nail slammed into you, like stand on a nail, for example.
mm,
That could really hurt you and set you off on a spiral. And for somebody else, that could just be like a little feather tickle, like, oh well, same
hmm
thing happened a year ago, whatever, We're
Yeah.
all individuals. And as a coach, it can be so hard to like actually be in your feminine and surrender to the fact that you can't control what you can't control. All
Mm,
you can do is lead from love and from a place of like genuine caring, and actually at the same time having the masculine essence come in enough to have not apathy but separation somewhat, so that you can have that emotional barrier and be like, you know what, they're on their own journey, I can only do what I can do, and at the end of the day it's their choice to make those changes.
mm,
And that's where, like, that beautiful balance, even if we're talking about emotional connection with others, that beautiful balance and play of masculine and feminine comes in, because we want to be empathic and connect with others on a really deep level. But at the same time, we don't want to connect so much so, and this is where the feminine can be overdone. We don't want to connect so much so that we're giving away all of our energy.
mm,
Yeah. So it's almost like you're putting energy into wanting to help people make those choices. You're actually wanting to control what's in their control, not what's in your control.
mhm,
And so we then have to use the healthy version or the healthy aspect of the masculine essence and bring in a little bit of barrier, a little bit of boundary
mm,
emotionally, and kind of step back a little. Maybe I don't want to use the word apathetic because that's like the opposite of empathetic, but stepping back enough to assert a boundary and still lovingly guide them when they
yeah.
choose for you to guide them. Yeah.
And I know you would have to do that a lot with what you do, especially like we were talking about this when you were doing the womb horror appointment with me. You have learned over time that you do have to create that barrier because it is
Mhm.
quite full on when you're feeling someone else's energy. Well, I'm
Yeah.
assuming like I don't do that energy work, but I'm assuming for you, you would have had to set that boundary, right? Like,
Definitely was a lesson. And it actually took, I wouldn't say a truck, but it took me a brick, I would
yeah.
say, for me to learn that lesson. I had and it was a really beautiful lesson.
Mm,
I had a male client come in and they crossed a boundary. I wouldn't say something super inappropriate, but it was like an unconscious, they didn't know what they were doing because they were experiencing their own somatic sensations during Reiki.
mm,
But they crossed a boundary in the sense that they grabbed my shoulder with their arm
mm,
because they needed the support and they didn't know how to express that healthily. And we could get into how men have been socially conditioned and brought up over the years to have that physical force and think that it's okay. But we're not going to go down that track. What had happened was he had grabbed me, he'd crossed a boundary, and it really affected me for like a week. And then I had to step back and go, well, hang on, how did that happen? How did we even get to that point where he thought it was okay to grab my hand for emotional support, or my shoulder in that case, and try and draw me in? He wasn't doing it from a place of like trying to do anything to me. He
yeah.
was just, it was his way of expressing, I need emotional support more than what your Reiki hands are giving me right now. So I had to reflect on that for the week and go, well, how did I even get to that point? And it's because I hadn't yet established a healthy emotional barrier between myself and my clients. I had to an extent, but I needed to go deeper with that.
Mm.
And so the next time I saw that client, I had to explain, well, hey, what you did actually wasn't okay. And it's okay that you didn't know that. I just didn't explain it properly.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't explain it properly at the time in retrospect is because I didn't feel comfortable enough to step into my masculine and create that boundary
Yeah, that
because I was being too empathetic. I was being, in that sense, too much in my unhealthy feminine and wanting to people please.
yeah, worrying about what they'll think
Yeah,
if you upset them. Yeah,
yeah,
100%
yeah,
resonate with
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So do you think in saying all this too, which I feel like I know the answer, but do you think like some people can get addictive with one sort of energy type?
100%. Like the example at the start that we leaded with was that you led with, sorry, was you're seeing your clients that are coming in are mothers who are really busy and they don't know how to switch off from it. Well, a
Mm,
part of that is, yes, they have dissociated from the feminine, but also they've become attached to what's now comfortable, and it's an addiction. And
yeah.
it's fueling their cycle. They're just cycling through it. We all work in cycles, but there's cycles that can transform and create growth and expansion. And then there's cycles that can kind of just stay stagnant.
Mm,
And that's again leaning into, am I being more in my fear in the way that I'm embodying my archetypes, or am I leaning more into the growth and expansion and the collective love?
yeah.
So, like, again, when you feel like you're utilizing the masculine or feminine in an unhealthy way, it's usually when you're feeling stuck and in fear and not moving.
Mm,
And yeah, that's it.
yeah. No, it makes sense because like as I said, I became addicted to the
Mm,
masculine energy. So yeah, I kind of knew the answer already, but I just thought it was really good to just kind of
bring
reiterate
it
that.
up.
Yeah, bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why do you think it's like how do you think this sort of conversation is going to help other people? Like, why do you think it's important for some people to know about the different sorts of energy, the masculine, the feminine, and how to bring balance?
Well, I kind of touched on it before with the whole trends and masculine and feminine energy becoming quite a trendy thing. There's also, for example, we touched on this a little bit in the last episode, ancestral trauma and ancestral lineage.
Hmm.
And that's also a fad that's come out recently. I'm seeing it pop up a lot.
I'm seeing it pop up a
And
lot too.
yes. And I've always loved it, as you'll know from my story of my life and how I came
Yeah,
to go into the energetics was actually from ancestral trauma.
yeah, I love that.
So that's something that I discovered in my mid 20s, like 7 years ago, but it's only just now popping up into community. And so to answer your question, like, how is this podcast episode going to help people? Well, it's trending right now, but it's trending for a reason. So I'm coming back to the collective. People are at the point right now where it's in demand.
Yeah.
We're all growing and expanding at different rates, but all somewhat together,
Mm,
right? We're all at different rates, but we're all journeying and experiencing the same way. Because whether it's a conscious connection because we're connected in a love, we're tapped into that love essence and we're consciously connected, or whether we're unconsciously connected because we're consciously in the fear zone, but we'll
mm,
always be tapped into that love. It's always there to
mm,
access. It's just unconscious at that point. So, for everyone who's listening, the reason why this podcast would be beneficial is because I feel like there's a lot of demand to know more about it.
mm.
And whoever's going to find themselves listening to this is going to be looking at the title of this podcast episode and going, wow, I've been seeing this a lot and I want to learn more and I'm hungry for it and I don't know why. Well, it's the collective. It's what the collective has in store for us right now. We all want to grow and expand. And I could actually bring in, I don't claim to know a lot about this, but it's definitely something to do with energetics and spirituality that I want to delve deeper into is astrology, which is the science of the planets and how the energy of those planets interact with us. Right now, we're going through a massive upheaval as of yesterday, actually. The Libra solar eclipse.
Is that because of the new moon? Does that have to do with that or not? Is that completely different?
Yeah, so we had the new moon, the Libra new moon yesterday, but it's
Yeah.
also a solar eclipse.
Ah, okay. So what does
And
this
I'm
mean?
going to keep it simple because again, I don't know lots,
Yeah.
but from the astrologers I've been following and from what I can see when I look into it, It's going to be a definition, we're all redefining how we, I guess, relate to one another in community, and it's all about connection. So, like, this solar eclipse also has a part of Aquarius with it, and Aquarius is like the upheaval of traditions and societal norms. It's shaking that and bringing in new ways of being. And so I think that's why we're really seeing shifts in people wanting to go deeper, do the work, and discover a new way of being that society has taught us to do for so long. Well, it's not working anymore, you
Yeah.
know?
Astrology, yeah, that's so fascinating to me. And I would love to learn. Once you learn more, then you'll have to teach me more because, yeah, that's one thing that I just don't have time at the moment to learn. But yeah, I
Yeah.
find that fascinating. So right now we're wanting, most people are kind of wanting more connection due to this eclipse. Is that what you were saying? Like more community?
Yeah, wanting to connect to the community, but in that connection, we're also learning to connect collectively to what it is we're wanting to grow and evolve into. So, like,
Yeah.
as we talked about before, like everyone's brick, feather, and truck experience can be different. But at the same time, at one point or another, we're all going to experience that. So
Yeah.
that's like the collective. And right now, if we're following planets and astrology, we're all being called to become way more communal. So we're all feeling that, whether it's conscious or unconscious, I believe. And so if we're feeling a deep desire to explore what burnout looks like, how it presents in the body, and how to harness better ways of being,
Mm,
we're all doing that right now through community. So you're
yeah.
seeing all these programs and courses coming out. This is the calling, whether it's conscious or not, as a person who's creating a course or as a person who wants to join a course. That's a way of creating community
Which,
and
yeah.
creating support.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to drive the needle with this Aquarian change that's coming up, like universally and planetarian, like in the planetarian energies, um, to drive change so that we can redefine what masculine and feminine is and what equality looks like. Because really, when feminism started, it was really just a calling to how can we balance the masculine and feminine, and how can we do that in a healthy way? Because
Mm,
that's what equality is. It's equalizing the masculine and feminine within for us all.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true because like all the courses out there, yeah, the materials and the what you get is amazing, but everyone wants that community aspect. Everyone wants to be in those groups, bouncing off each other, help supporting each other.
Mhm.
Like that's what I think is really key in those courses. Talking about courses, don't you have
Mhm.
one that has just been released? Did you want to
Yes,
talk
yes.
about
We can
that?
talk about this and then we'll talk about yours because we both do.
Yes, yeah, go for it.
So I just released Feminine Harmony. It's a program that will become whole and completed and come to fruition by January next year.
Yeah, perfect
So right
timing.
now,
Start of the new year. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What is it? Like New Year's resolution? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
So right now it's going through its teething phases. Um, I like to be very humble and realistic in what I offer.
Mm,
And if it's something that's new, I don't want to charge full price if it's not whole and complete yet. And
yeah,
also if it hasn't been trialed and tested, and I don't know if it's effective or not yet.
yeah,
So right now it's going through a beta phase and it's really at a very reduced price. And it actually ends tomorrow, that pricing. But
yeah,
then I'm just slowly, incrementally taking the course through pricing increases until we get to January. And that's actually a reflection of how the course is developing over time up until January. So we're
yeah,
in beta phase one, and there's two more phases between now and January. And right now, the course, I've got the skeleton designed out. It's all designed to tap into the energetics and the spirituality, very much so, but also in conjunction with our female bodies, our female cycles, how to tap into rebalancing the masculine and feminine within, and like within the four bodies. So, like physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, energetic as well.
mm,
So the course covers all of that. And in doing that, it's really targeted at what you and I have been just talking about. It's targeted at overcoming burnout.
mm,
Because when you
yeah,
think about it, that's what people know to be true right now.
yeah,
Everyone's burnt out, everyone's go, go, go. They
hmm
know how to resonate with that. If they don't know a lot about energetics, then they're not going to resonate with me selling a course that says, I'm going to connect you to your deeper masculine and feminine. Well, like, what is that? Right?
Yeah.
We started this episode with what even is that? No
Yeah.
one knows what that is. So
Yeah.
it is going to really help in terms of like driving the needle to get you out of burnout. But essentially, the essence of feminine harmony is actually harmonizing our feminine bodies to balance and equalize the masculine and feminine within on a holistic level, mind,
Yeah.
body, soul,
Yeah, you
emotions.
really bring that energetics to it, which is a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And it really
Yeah.
does. I was actually one of the last podcasts, I was actually saying how amazing it is when you can create that connection with your body again. Like when we really get disassociated with our body. And I feel like you're
Mm.
really going to help bring that. Is it, do you do like lives with people, or is it all just self-paced, or the
So
program?
it's self-paced.
Yeah.
There's also group calls, one or
Yeah.
two a week. As my community grows, it'll be one a week, but while it's
Nice.
in the beta teething phases, it's going to be twice a week.
Yeah, nice.
And then we also have a Facebook group for community, as
Beautiful.
well as in a buddy up people. So they have like kind of like not study buddies, but people that they can check in with more
Or like
one on
lean
one, so it
on.
feels safer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's nice. Yeah, to let that
yeah.
lean on that. As I said, that support is amazing in courses, like
Mm,
any sort of course. Like I did a course this year as a business course, but I still speak with the women in the group that we had. We still talk to this day. So
mm.
they're massive changes, massive impacts. Because I think women, like we grew up, like you probably know a lot more about this, but in the ancestral time, like we were in a lot of communities. So it makes sense that we seek that. I actually made this post like not long ago where I was like, I used to tell myself when I first became a mother, because I was a young mum at the time, not a lot of other mums around me were, I mean, not a lot of other women around me were having kids. So I was always like, it's okay. I'm really good on my own. I'm really good with my own company. I don't need anyone else. Like I'm actually real. Like I used to say that all the time. And I think it was me just trying to convince myself. I used to even joke about it with like colleagues at work and being like, I don't have any friends. Like I would always say that because that's how I work. I use humor to deflect. But it was so me just trying to convince myself, but I really, really craved that connection. I really craved that support. And
And
yeah,
I think, sorry to interrupt, but I do think a big part of that is because society has not only shaped us unconsciously to be more like the masculine at that point in time, but also there's this branding of if I need anyone, I'm codependent.
yeah,
When it's really not the case, because you can actually redefine what codependency is versus interdependence. And I think people often mistake what interdependence is versus codependence.
yeah,
Codependence is when I'm relying on somebody else to make me whole. Interdependence is I know I'm whole, I know who I am and who my ego, my identity, and my essence is, but I seek support because I can't do this all on my own. I seek community
yeah.
and I'm comfortable in that. We as a society are still coming into that. We haven't fully felt that and embodied that yet.
Yeah, and that's true. That's what I felt. Like I felt like, oh, if I do this on my own, I can show everyone how strong I am, how independent I am, how amazing I am at doing this
Mm.
on my own. And yeah, as you said, it was just a thing that I thought that was the way to prove that, but it's not the way. Like now I know, obviously. And I'm thriving because I've met so many women in business and out, and even when since moving. Like, so it's been the best thing. So I definitely think like any woman out there, if you're saying that to yourself, I was there. And trust me,
Check yourself.
we thrive in communities. So this program
Yeah.
it sounds amazing, and I'm really excited. I'll put it in the show notes below. So if anyone's interested, they can either reach out or I'm sure there's a sign up that you've got. So I'll put it
Yeah.
all the links there.
Yeah. The best way to connect with me, honestly, is through Instagram. It's just
Yeah,
somatic.body,
yeah.
like my
I'll put
handle.
that there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
always
then I
find
also have,
Instagram.
Facebook and a website. So you'll find me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
easy, and you're so like easily approachable.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. So thank you so much. I loved this
Thank you.
chat. Um, I think it's going to help so many women. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for talking about this. I'm so excited for you in the program, and
I'm excited for you and your program.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the holistic method that is started as well. It's pretty much similar to yours, but less with the energetics. So I definitely think
Hmm.
like there is a good audience for you with, especially around the energetics part. If anyone has just resonated with that, like we focus more on like, yeah, nutrition, mindset, and then somatic movement and things. But yeah, less with the energy. We were even saying like we definitely need to bring you on sometime so we can have that aspect in there and kind of have it all in one. That would be
That would
amazing.
be such a beautiful thing too, to balance that out too with myself, because obviously I don't dabble as much as you guys do with like the somatic, yes, the somatic embodiment, but not the somatic exercise type of movement,
Yeah,
like what Gabby brings in. And then, with you, Gemma, the nutrition, like, well, I don't know much about that. Like
yeah.
you,
There's
you
only
have
so
so
much
much
you
of that
can
to bring
learn
in.
on your
Yeah,
own.
yeah,
So
exactly, exactly. You cannot do it on your own. That's the whole point of community. Yeah.
exactly, you just ended it like the most perfect way. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for coming on. I love this chat and I hope you have a wonderful time in the US. And I can't wait
Thank
to see
you.
more of your adventures in Europe when you go back there as well. I'm definitely watching. If anyone else, follow her Instagram, somatic.body, but I'll put it in the links. But yeah, you want to watch Shannon because she's doing amazing things right now. So yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
All good. And I'll talk to everyone in the next episode. Bye, guys.